Hello, I'm Jennifer, and welcome to the Crew of Japan podcast, a weekly podcast where we take you on audio journeys through Japanese culture. Welcome back to our podcast. Today, we're going to be looking back at what people now consider the golden age of anime. You may be familiar with some of these anime that we'll be discussing today, but we'll be giving you an in-depth look into why this period of time is highly acclaimed by many and how some of these anime are still talked about today. Who knows, maybe we'll even convince you to go back and watch some of these anime that you could have missed out on watching. Well, today I am here with my co-hosts Nigel and Doug.
Wow, it's been a long time since we've been on a show together, all three of us, huh?
Yeah, I've been really busy as of late, but my schedule is now finally free, and I'm so happy to really, join M for the rest of the season.
Our Instagram is really happy for you to be back too.
Yeah, Instagram is very happy. Well, you came on the right episode, Nigel, because we're talking about anime today, and I think this is like your known spot for anime. I think you're going to be good with this episode, with this anime.
Yeah, I think this is the era that like really captured me, so
I think it captured many people from like our generation of like anime watching. And so to go with that, this time span of anime from the 90s to early 2000s, pretty much like up to 2010, a lot of people consider the golden age of anime. The golden age of anime used to be like the 80s, but it's moved through the years, and now this time span is called the golden age. I guess I want to bring up the question of why is that? Why do we think this term has traveled upward to the year?
It's like NBA, where they say like, oh, the best basketball was in the 90s, and then people nowadays say, oh no, the best basketball is now. It's one of those moving targets where just as the fan base gets louder for a certain genre or time period, then I think it changes, right? It changes the narrative, or also social media too, I think.
Oh, that's a good point, because think about it. Okay, so the people who watched anime in the 80s, they either stuck with anime or they dropped watching anime. And then a new group arose and, started watching anime because it did become more accessible than in the 80s.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe that's why it moved, like this terminology of golden age.
I think that's a good point that you made about accessibility. I think it wasn't as prevalent, or maybe the perception wasn't as mainstream during the 80s and before.
90s and early 2000s anime was not mainstream.
It wasn't. But as you got into the 2000s, like where Toonami started to come in, we're going to talk about that later. But I feel like things became much more common. It wasn't seen as much. I mean, it still was as a nerdy, geeky thing, right? But it was much more accepted than it may have been, perceived prior to that. And I think that like things like the accessibility of like Dragon Ball and other shows like Cowboy Bebop, and things like that came on cable TV, as opposed to having to go to your niche, either illegally selling fan subs comic book shop, Crescent Zero, or like Suncoast Video. I feel like is a big one that was here.
Oh yeah, I used to go there.
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like those places are the ones where that was your only access point until things start to come on TV more often.
Yeah, I mean, I think not to like simplify it, because I know there's a lot of moving factors on what really probably logistically makes this the golden age, but I think like you said, Doug, the golden age will always be a moving post, and I think that's partially because the technology and the accessibility of it gets better. I mean, if you put the anime of like the beginning, or part one, you look at Astro Boy and you look at, I don't know, One Piece, you look at how much the animation improved, and how much of a global reach those two factors alone, even if let's say Astro Boy dealt with more hard hitting topics like nuclear weapons, the reach of One Piece is just immense, and also the advancement in technology of animation makes it easier to watch for people as well. So I think the golden age is always, like you said, a moving goalpost, and the age we're living in now, will probably be the golden age when we look back on it in a few years. You look at places like Crunchyroll, how much that has really, really, increased the access for people.
Yeah.
Well, we'll talk about that in part 3 because I actually am going to be the opposite of you and play devil's advocate and still believe that the golden age of anime will still be this 90s and 2000s for quite a while. Which we'll get to that in part 3 and I'll tell you why and all the logistics of it. But just
Nice little teaser there.
yeah, nice little teaser there. But for the concept of the golden age anime, what are some anime that you feel represent this age of anime? And how it changed the way people view and see anime and what breakthroughs it maybe made in the industry. I know one of them for me that like probably still I actually not probably it still makes rounds today is Sailor Moon. It got re-released. Not only the older anime got re-released into a new like dub. They even did a new version of the anime that follows the manga. So it broke through time. It was revolutionary, honestly.
Yeah, I remember being a young boy, loving watching Sailor Moon. And like at the time, I remember that was crazy. I didn't even tell anybody I watched Sailor Moon. But I had a cousin who also was a Sailor Moon fan, and we were like, "Oh, dude, the show is so awesome!" And it's crazy, that I would for sure put that in the category of, for me, one of the earliest anime that I remember really like making an impact. Um, right up there with, for me, I would say Dragon Ball Z. Um, I, I I don't think Dragon Ball Z really needs an introduction. It's its presence is just, yeah, immense on not just anime fans but pop culture in general. I mean, you can find references to Dragon Ball Z in sports and music and art and any pretty much any other field. I think that's incredible, and it's a testament to how much of a legacy it's left, and how much of a claim or a seat at the table it has of the golden age of anime.
Definitely, because it's still talked about today. That's the thing. That's why I'm saying this age of anime is the golden age when it can, have a staying value to people and watchability, and it's still lived on today. I mean, that's so rare in anime. And for some reason, a bunch of anime in this time period is doing that. And it's amazing to see.
Yeah, I think another one too. And I don't know about so much here. I mean, it does have a fan base here. But Neon Genesis Evangelion, if you go to Japan, I mean, that's everywhere. Like that theme
It
song
is.
is everywhere. Nigel, you want to sing it for us? No, it is.
I respectfully decline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just something that I think it's had a much more cultural impact in terms of leaving that mark, like you were talking about. It stamped it with, whether it's a song, whether it's a character, whether it's just just the story itself. Something will A culture will grab it, and it'll become so ingrained in the culture that it's just, even people who aren't anime fans are involved in, like, are aware of it, like even my parents know what Dragon Ball is, right? Like they know who Goku is, not because they watched it, but because just I knew about it, my brother watches it, it's just, it's such a it transcends like just a fan base. It's a cultural piece. So yeah, I think those are, I mean, you mentioned Sailor Moon. I agree with that, and Dragon Ball especially. And I think Evangelion. I think those are like kind of like a big three of sorts in the '90s. Or maybe I don't even know if the '90s, but
Well, those three in particular, yes, the 90s.
yeah,
Specifically the 90s, and you can tell the difference between, you know, anime in the 90s and anime in the early 2000s. You can sort of see a physical shift that's happening, not only with the way the anime, like the story is being told, but also the artwork. You can distinctively tell that there's a gradual change. And that's what's so interesting about this age of anime, is because you're going from this stylistic anime of the 90s, early, like just right at 2000 maybe, and it's making a shift all of a sudden, because then in the early 2000s you have anime like Ouran High School Host Club, Full Metal Alchemist, Death Note, huge, that was huge, um and Code Geass. You have all these early 2000 anime that have such a distinct difference from the 90s anime that we were just talking about. And even those are still talked about today. The fan bases are still there. People still love to mess with Death Note. Just let it die. Please stop ruining it.
One, I take it you're not a fan of the Netflix
No,
Death Note live action movie.
I was fine with the original Japanese live action of Death Note. Why in the world did Netflix have to do that to me?
Yeah, I agree. It's not the finest work. However, one of the things I was going to ask is, so you said there was a change that you can see in the anime of that time. So you're saying there's a change from the previous era in this one, or were you saying there's a change in like the early part of this anime and like you can see it moving forward within this own era?
The second one, the change from the early discussion of anime during this time period, like I said, the 90s, to this early 2000s, you can see the difference in the change. And that's what's so interesting, because when we talked about in our first part, the 60s to 80s, there was a little bit of a change, but not as visible as this. This was clearly a visible change.
yeah. I would almost say like it's obviously the quality of the animation definitely took a jump. I feel. I don't want to say grainy. It sounds so degrading a term, but you can see kind of just the quality of animation. Not that it was bad before, but you could see it become much more crisp and clean, like cleaner lines, cleaner coloring, and things like that. I feel like I noticed that personally, and I don't know if maybe I'm not phrasing it right, but like I noticed that from like you were saying with Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z and those kind of older ones from the '90s, or not older, but mid to mid '90s to late '90s. But then you had those other ones you mentioned, like Death Note and Full Metal Alchemist, which look much more crisp and clean when they're shown on screen.
Yeah. Well, for that, the reasoning is because in the early 90s, they were still using, draw every frame, then animate. Whereas now you're going into a time when they were experimenting more with animation than drawing. And then not only that, and I think a lot of people hesitate to say this because they feel like they don't know what they're talking about or whatever. But between those two time periods in this one time of the golden age, character designs are changing. They're no longer, their eyes are changing. For example, the latest from this time period in like 2010, K-On! Was introduced, which was the first, I guess you can consider it almost the first moe anime. You had these cute girls with these round eyes, and that K-On! Pretty much signifies, okay, now we're leaving the golden age and we're going to modern day anime. So, you have different styles of art, you had different styles of storytelling, honestly. I mean, if we're thinking about storytelling, Death Note and probably Full Metal Alchemist were pretty they're not really for kids, honestly. Especially Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, if we're gonna add Brotherhood into that. You know.
That's an interesting point. So, would you say this is a fair statement? The anime of the previous generation was more kid friendly, but the anime of this generation really took a turn into um
And just into having a broader audience.
yeah, and me being a little bit more not so kid friendly.
Yes and no. I say yes because the amount of anime that has this kind of theming is distinct. Whereas, in the 90s you had a few that were kind of like for older kids, such as like Ghost in the Shell, that's like very mature. In the previous episode for part 1, Nigel, you talked about Akira, which is very not appropriate for children. um but so you do have those kind of anime here and there, but not as prominent as like in the early 2000s. I do feel like they really did expand their library of like, okay, we want to expand on who's watching anime and almost kind of going with the previous people, because it seemed like that today. I mean, today they're re-releasing so many anime such as Sailor Moon, Fruits Basket. They just did sequels to Inuyasha with Yashahime. They're paying homage to the Golden Age viewers and like, hey, you remember these anime that you love? We got your back. We're gonna re-release them. So, this even when the anime industry is so keen on pleasing the Golden Age viewers, I mean, it's hard to say that the golden age is ever gonna move, honestly, if it continues with this kind of, releasing of anime.
One of the things I think that's really interesting about, particularly like the really like the early golden age anime is the what was going on in like Japan at the time. That 90s era is considered like the lost generation. And a lot of the media reflects that the manga, the anime, and they say that the things that they were projecting and capturing in the media, the angst of the young population and things like that was portrayed in the anime, which we then later, in that time, the U.S., the young population we experienced about a few years later. And so we were going through kind of the same things that young people were going through in Japan a few years later. And that wave of media, anime, and manga really hit us, and we really connected with it because we were going through the same things that they were going through. And that might be another reason that, that it will never get old to us, because it spoke to us on a deeper societal level. And we connected, and it wasn't just a like a cartoon, but the actual themes that they were portraying. If you go back and look at a lot of these anime, it's young adults, entering into a world of uncertainty and facing these challenges. And yeah, there's all these different elements into it. They might be ninjas, they might be
Mechs.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, they might be, fighting in giant robots. Thrown into an adult world, and they have to fend for themselves. But there's so many of these similar themes, but it's kind of timeless. It doesn't really get old. There's going to be a generation of kids that always probably really connect with that.
Yeah. And what's interesting, tr almost getting back to what I was talking about how, a lot of these anime are probably meant for an older audience, is the fact that the way anime was being viewed during this time, and one of the important players for this is the age of Toonami. For those of you who don't know, Toonami was a segment on TV, I'm sure it's like this for all the channels, but Cartoon Network, late night. I would stay up till like 2 o'clock in the morning to watch Inuyasha come on.
Well, that was Adult Swim though. Toonami was originally
A part of Adult Swim, and
yeah,
it connected with both. So you had
yeah.
Toonami first, and then Adult Swim took over once it hit like almost midnight, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
well, was that early on, I want to say Adult Swim was like totally separate. It used to be like a Sunday night only, and then they expanded it out to the rest of
Yeah.
the week because that's where Cowboy Bebop and uncut, unfiltered, unedited, unabridged Gundam Wing like aired. You know, they didn't show they which essentially they would show blood, as opposed to in like the Toonami block where they wouldn't. Because I remember that and I was like watching, I'm like, man, what's the difference? Like, there's not much. I think maybe they had like a
Right.
gun
There
or
wasn't
something
too much
show
of
up
a
in an episode.
Yeah, there wasn't too much of a difference. It was a game changer, though.
Yeah,
You no longer had to go to Suncoast to
right.
buy the DVDs that were excruciatingly painful for my wallet because they didn't come in box sets. You had to do individual DVD volumes. Um, but it it was a game changer. I mean, to watch anime on TV at a certain time with, you know, more of a older audience theme because like we were saying, Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon, I mean, this is also with it, but like Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, those were all like Saturday morning cartoons or like morning cartoons that were safe for kids, whereas Toonami and Adult Swim, because it was kind of like I said, it was intertwining. They were playing, Gundams, they were playing Death Note. I remember they played Full Metal Alchemist, which
Did they?
yeah, yeah.
See, so I guess I'm just remembering the beginning of Toonami where it was like literally it was like Reboot, Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball, and then Gundam Wing or Tenchi Muyo. Like those were like the shows, the 2 hour block. I remember rushing home from school, because I would only be able to catch the back end of it. And I remember sometimes having to set like a VHS tape, guys. I'm dating myself here. I'd have to record, on TV what would be coming on in case I missed it. So I like the fact that they created Adult Swim and then incorporated Toonami into that told you right there that they were trying to target a separate segment or a separate audience base than they were with
Oh,
Toonami because
definitely.
Toonami was like after school, a daily after school dose of your anime. Saturday morning cartoons, obviously that's geared more towards like younger kids, not necessarily the teenagers. But Adult Swim's like, hey, this is like, yeah, you're teenagers in high school maybe, but also this is for adults. Like, this is on at midnight. It's on at 11. So obviously it's not
Yeah,
kid friendly or intended to be kid friendly.
yeah.
I'm sure a lot of kids stayed up and watch it, but yeah.
One of the most ironic things about Adult Swim, right, is I didn't know many adults that were actually watching it. It was
Yeah.
like young adult swim, because like everyone I knew was watching it was like almost teenagers or
Which
teenagers.
is funny because now I only know adults watching Adult Swim. Like I don't think that. I mean, there are. I feel like it's more of it's just age with the person, right? Like they started out as kids or maybe teenagers watching it, and then as they got older, it kind of grew with them. So they would change the shows. I mean, I don't even know. Do they show anime on Adult Swim anymore, or is it just like those kind of wacky off the wall shows that are like C Lab and
If I'm
Aqua
not
Teen?
mistaken, I think nowadays Adult Swim sticks to like those wacky like adult cartoons, because Toonami, obviously, as everyone may know, made a comeback.
Yeah.
It is back. So now Toonami is in the age of modern anime, and they play a lot of modern things, which is good for the generation of now. They are experiencing what we experienced when we were, teenagers. So I think that's a great thing. I'm not mad about it at all. But yeah, Toonami even today is still a major game player in the whole distribution of anime, because anime on TV, I mean, there's nothing better than anime on TV, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, I think anime on TV is great for the exposure. And I think without the TV element, you don't get this golden age, because if all of us were left to our own devices to find the different shows, I don't know if we would have. But having it on cable TV was instrumental. Now, the one thing I think is the downside of having it on cable TV is the censorship, right?
Ah, yes, because I can tell you for sure, like, Gundam probably was more violent than what we saw on TV. Yu Yu Hakusho was probably more violent than what it was on TV. any of
Oh,
them.
yeah.
I know, right? Dude, I'm looking at my anime shelf right now, and I can call out all the ones that were on Toonami and Adult Swim. That's
I feel like though that was intentional because they had the cut version and then the unedited version that was released on DVD. So it was a twofold thing. It drove the DVD market because they were like, "Hey, there's this whole other version that we can't show on TV."
Ah,
And is it? I don't want to say marketing, but it was intentional because they need to get around some of the censorship because of some of the regulations on like what they can show for kids shows, um, especially if it's airing during those blocks. But then they could say, hey, well, there is more. If you want to know, you have to buy the Blu-ray or the DVD box set or whatever. So yeah, or or the VHS tapes. Um, I don't have them anymore, but I used to have all the Dragon Ball Z uncut ones, right? Where Trunks would slice up Frieza or whatever, and they actually showed like the was it? I don't know if it's the blood, but yeah, there's scenes where like they actually showed his like parts floating, as opposed to where they just blasted him away in like the edited version. So there's like it's literally like milliseconds worth of footage, but you know, people are willing to pay the extra $10 for the edited or the unedited versus the edited.
Well, one of the things too, though, I think like, so when I think of censorship, I do think of like animation choices and like visual scenes, and of course, blood and guns are like the two things that I immediately think of.
yeah.
But I think the other thing I think of with censorship in cable TV is the actual translations too
That's true.
of what characters are actually saying. And so you get a lot more like cursing, in the like Dragon Ball Z is one I can definitely think of. In the uncut, air quotations, uncut versions, you get that a lot more than you did on the
Well, did
Toonami
they
version.
actually? I can't even remember. Or did they even use like curse words in Dragon Ball Z on the uncut ones? I don't even remember that.
Not like major, like,
Yeah, like
they're
bastard or
not
something, right?
dropping
Or
like
like,
F-bombs or anything, but there's a few, like Toonami wouldn't air the word like damn,
yeah.
like
Oh, true.
on
Yeah.
Dragon
Right.
Ball Z.
Yeah.
And those are things that, were heavily used in like the uncut versions.
Yeah.
I feel like they let Inuyasha do a lot of bad words.
Well, I always remember Inuyasha coming on like the Adult Swim, like at like the post Toonami part.
Okay, so Inuyasha would come on twice. It would come on earlier during the night and then at around like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Because I remember sometimes I would wake up to like the Inuyasha ending song and I'd be like, no, I missed it. Dang it. I remember Inuyasha saying some really bad words sometimes. I was like, ooh, bad boy.
Oh, yeah. He's a potty mouth. Put some money in the swear jar there. I remember Cowboy Bebop though was I think one that really pushed the envelope in terms of what they showed. Like, because it was Gundam Wing was kind of a mature. I haven't really watched Gundam Wing since high school. So I don't really remember the full context of everything that went on, but I feel like if I went back and watched it now versus when I'd be like, holy crap, this is kind of like politically intense, like kind of just everything involved. It's not your typical like, hey, let's fight Frieza for 10 episodes like show. It's much more plot driven and
Yeah, a
character.
lot of the Gundam series have like political messages.
Yeah,
Not like messages where like they're trying to brainwash us or whatever, but like
yeah,
it's
no,
political themes.
yeah.
It deals with like real world issues, I find.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that was kind of like the first step to exposing it to a more mature audience, but also like then Cowboy Bebop really, I think, because that was much more, I don't say dark, but there was a lot heavier. There were a lot of heavier episodes if you went and watched. It wasn't always happy endings and good things happening at the end.
Yeah.
Especially if you watched to the end, it wasn't happy endings.
Oh,
So
don't tell me that now. I'm remembering it. Sadness has overcome me now.
They had really good music too. Cowboy Bebop's like soundtrack was amazing. But yeah, I feel like that was really one of the gateways to mass distribution of like a more mature anime market. That
Yeah.
like you had your Dragon Balls that were like kind of like mass distribution to like the world or like the country, but Cowboy Bebop was really like kind of the gateway into a mature audience.
I feel like Cowboy Bebop and Trigun
Yeah,
both
try. Oh, I forgot about Trigun.
Dude, I have all of Trigun. That's why I'm looking at my anime shelf. I'm like, okay, what can we talk about for the 90s? My anime shelf is mostly 90s. But yeah, no, Cowboy Bebop and Trigun definitely did that. And I want to point out something about this anime on television, because anime on television did something unbelievable for this time, and it's never done this ever again. Do y'all know what I'm talking about when I say the big three in anime?
Only because I'm looking at the script.
Yes. Yes, because I was a fan of the big three.
Yeah, the big three. So your big three are Naruto, Bleach, and One Piece. Everyone knew these anime, and it's all thanks to television. It was accessible, except for you, Doug,
No,
apparently.
I knew Naruto. I know Bleach. I know of Bleach. I've never actually read or watched
Okay.
any of Bleach. And One Piece I've never actually watched, but I've read the manga. So, but part of the manga. So, but yeah, like those are really the big three. And I think they kind of came from, well, maybe not One Piece. One Piece wasn't from the same, didn't have the same starting point as Naruto and Bleach. Because I remember back in high school. No, I was in junior high. My uncle's brother was married to a Japanese lady. And this is when I first started getting interested in Japanese culture and wanting to learn the language and stuff like that back in middle school. And so he was like, yeah. And this is like right on when like emailing and messaging started to become popular. So I would start to like, he got her email address and we became kind of like pen pals. And it lasted for I could probably go back in my email and find it, but it lasted for not very long. But I remember her mentioning One Piece. And I think that was at that point still like 200 episodes in or whatever, like 200 issues into the manga. And it was like early or mid 90s. So, One Piece is kind of dated back to the same. I don't know what the exact start point was. Do you know?
In the 90s, like the later 90s.
Yeah, I was about to say it's kind of like mid to
for
late,
anime, at
right?
least, for anime.
So it kind of ages back to when the Dragon Ball Z's, but it doesn't get lumped in with them. It gets much more lumped in with
Correct.
Naruto's and Bleach's, which I always found really interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. Naruto, Bleach, and One Piece, for some reason, made an impact on the community during this time. And I think it all had to do with the length of the anime as well. I mean, people could debate this about Dragon Ball Z as well, but for some reason, Dragon Ball Z didn't make it into the big three. I think it had to do with like maybe animation quality, maybe like the difference in like storytelling, possibly, because Naruto, Bleach, and One Piece are very unique stories. You have one about Pirate King, you have one about ninjas and villages, and then you have one about soul, like Death Eaters or Soul Eaters, and out of body experience. It's so weird, but and they're so long running. Like back in the day, when all three of these were like on television, I don't think any of us realized when they were going to stop or if they were going to stop.
Naruto still technically hasn't stopped.
Yeah, Naruto still technically hasn't stopped. It had Naruto Shippuden, and then now we have Boruto. So yeah, Naruto technically didn't stop, and One Piece is still going.
Yeah, and
The
One
only
Piece
one
will
that
never end.
stopped, yeah, the only thing that stopped was Bleach, and that's even making a comeback soon.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. Breaking news if you didn't know already.
I didn't.
Just coming.
Yeah, honestly, I think so. Dragon Ball Z never reached that big three, but I almost would argue that it kind of was in a league of its own, though. And perhaps it didn't need to because of how pop culture absorbed it, and that like again like I know many people who could tell you who Goku is, but they can't tell you who Sasuke is. And I know Sasuke is like a huge thing, and like people know it, but still, like, so I just went on a trip to Florida actually, and while I was in Florida, there's all these like like these cheesy gift shops, and where you can buy the I Love Florida shirts and stuff. Right there with the I Love Florida shirt, there's a shirt that says "I'm training to beat Goku." I'm like, what? That's so random, but like again, there it is. I think The big three definitely, and I would say I was probably more influenced by the big three than I was Dragon Ball Z, but I still think Dragon Ball Z has some type of special place in in pop culture on its own.
Would you say that the big three kind of came more into play in the 2000s than in the 90s in terms of US
Yeah.
exposure?
Yeah, for sure. Which I think is interesting because I think when like Naruto for example, um Jen, maybe you can correct me here, but I believe when it started airing here, I mean, it had already been airing in the 90s in Japan. It had already taken off, but it got here like all anime or at that time, it came here a little bit a few years after. And Naruto is one of those things that it had already been around in the 90s, late 90s, but really took off
Yeah,
here
and
in the
that's because of
2000s.
Toonami. Toonami took in Naruto and Bleach, which is why they became such powerhouses and became part of the big three.
One thing I think too about Naruto and One Piece, I can't really speak to Bleach, but I feel like in those shows specifically, and I think this is a differentiating point from like DBZ, is I feel like the ancillary characters get much more depth given to them, and even the main characters, they give them much more of a backstory and much more like you have your Tiens and Yamchas. You don't really know much about their past, right? You don't really care about them that much. They're just there. I mean, you
Yeah.
have people that are fans of them or whatever, but then you have like your Naruto characters that are very much side characters that are not part of the main trio that is initially you're introduced to, and you have as much of a love for those characters as you do for the main ones, because they give them that depth, and I think that was a differentiating point between the style of DBZ and the style of Naruto and Bleach and One Piece.
You're right, because like I said, the storytelling elements have changed. They started to put the spotlight on other characters, not just the main characters. I mean, you have Naruto fans right now who are like, you know, thanks for, thinking of us with a sequel for Boruto, but we really want a prequel. Like, because they want to know about these older characters. They want to hear about their stories. So, yeah, you do have that story element change of now we're focused on a bunch of characters, and you can like the Hinatas, you can like the Chojis, you can like all these side characters that don't get as much attention as like maybe the main character. And that was like that for Bleach as well. So it just, these three played such an important role, and I think the mass watching of anime, because everyone knows what Naruto is now. Everyone. I mean, you have college campuses doing the Naruto run. I mean, everyone knows what Naruto is.
Did One Piece actually make it on TV?
So One Piece had a 4 Kids release, which
Oh,
was really bad.
yeah. 4 Kids,
It
yep.
was a
I wonder why.
bad time.
Hey, I watched it though. It was
And then later, it didn't have any other TV appearance, but for some reason, it still had a lasting effect, and people still love it today. Which I'm going to make the biggest confession of all.
All right, let's hear it.
I actually hate One Piece. I give it like a 0 out of 10.
Wow. All right,
whoa.
bye. I'm hanging up.
Whoa. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. And I definitely want to hear why, but I'm wondering if it has anything to do with what Doug was saying. And what I feel about One Piece is if a character looks at the camera in the distance, like they're in the background, they look at the camera, they're getting a whole arc of like story and content and backstory of who that was.
Yeah.
And that's what I think One Piece is in the thousands of episodes
Oh
now.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, like it's been calculated physically that you could not catch up to the anime right now. Like you literally cannot. Like even if you didn't sleep, didn't eat, didn't go to the bathroom, you still can't catch up.
I'm trying to read the manga. So there's like 1,000 something issues out. I'm on 84, and I calculated I could, if I read 10 a day, 10 a day, I could catch up in Hold on. Oh man, I'm making myself do math on the spot. Uh-oh. I can catch up in like 100 days. Or I guess at this point, 90 days, since I'm almost at 100 already. But yeah, the problem is I don't have the energy by the end of the day. When I sit down to actually read is at night when I'm about to go to bed, and then I'll like read one chapter and fall asleep halfway through it. So I have to reread the same chapter probably like 4 times.
Yeah. Well, Jen, why don't you like it?
I mean, this is completely me. I understand a lot of people love this anime. I get so much I get pains when people hear that I don't love One Piece, and I'm used to it by now. But my reasoning honestly is just I'm not interested in the story. I'm not interested in the characters. I just don't understand. I had a friend in college who, we met, we figured out that we both liked anime, and I was like, "Oh, cool. What do you watch?" And she was like, "I watch One Piece." And I was like, "Oh no!"
Bye.
Like I watched a little bit of One Piece on 4Kids, and I was like, and she's like, no, you can't use that. Let's watch it on this. And we watched it on one of I don't know one of her websites or whatever. And I think I got up to episode 32 and I was like, please let me out of your dorm room. Stop keeping me captive. It was just god awful. I hated all 32 episodes.
Well, see, I tried not rewatching. I tried watching the first few episodes of One Piece on Netflix because I think it's out on Netflix now, right? A good chunk of it. So I tried sitting down and watching it, and I'm like, I just can't do it. So I think for me, ingesting One Piece is much better done in a manga setting than an anime setting. If I wanted to partake in that series, I don't have the energy or the time to commit to watching One Piece. Whereas, it's same thing for Naruto. Actually, I would love to. I've heard so much good stuff about it. I have so many friends that are into it. That there's so much good stuff. And granted, you have to fight past the filler episodes that they have. I hear a lot of. Um, but there are guides out there to where you cut out episodes like these chunks. But I just those long running shows, I just can't do them.
Yeah,
I just
it's
me
hard.
at this
I
point in my life.
I mean,
uh,
Naruto, I used to think indifferently about Naruto. And like after the little Naruto ended and Shippuden came on, I was like, you know what? This is a good time to stop. I am done. But then a friend got me back into it. I'm like, no. And then I watched Shippuden, and then Boruto came out. I was like, okay, now this is it. I'm cutting the string of fate. No more. And then I got back into Naruto again with Boruto, and I hate myself for it. But it's really good. I do enjoy. I don't know why. There's something about the Naruto series that it's a guilty pleasure. I just enjoy it. I don't know why. Ugh.
well, you are
Hey,
alone.
no, I get you. Like for me, so Dragon Ball Z was like the original, but Naruto probably played a bigger role in cementing me into like the whole anime landscape. And I think it goes back to part of what I was saying about like what was going on in that lost generation and the media. If you look at One Piece, you look at Naruto and Bleach, I'm not as much of a fan of, so I can't really say. But for sure, for One Piece and Naruto, it's the same premise of a young character, young adult going out into an unknown world where adults control everything and you have to find your way,
Yeah.
and you make friends along the way. And that theme connects with so many people. But why One Piece, Naruto, and Bleach, why they succeeded so much, I don't really know. But for sure, I think I'm a fan of Naruto. I will always be a fan of Naruto. I have not actually jumped into the Boruto
You should do
thing. I did for a little bit, but then I fell off, and I just haven't got back on the train. But
it's
now
really
that now that yeah, now that Kishimoto's back in the fold, I actually might return to it.
I mean,
But
all three of these did something that a lot of people have gripe about, and that's filler episodes. So, like what you were saying, Doug, Naruto, Bleach, and One Piece are all three guilty of this, but yet we still love it, and I don't know why. And I mean, I know we're not giving much love and attention to Bleach. I'll be the one to do it though. I will say Bleach did really good for a while. It was up to like episode 100 and like 12, I think, or 10. I had to stop because the filler was starting to get so bad that was like, I can't do this anymore. And then I heard the ending was like amazing or whatever, so I was like, oh well. But I think that's what happened, is just filler got a lot of people with these three. And but it still lasted so long, and it still is loved today. And so my question for you two are, will there ever be another big three? Like, could there ever be ever again? Like, especially now, because One Piece is still going. It has not ended. Technically, Naruto is still the same. Will there ever be another big three?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's, to me, I think it's a tendency that people have that really enjoyed a certain moment in time. Of it can be sports, it can be media, it can be music, to say there will never be another this person or never be another like this, and there always is. There always is. I mean, it's a fact of I say fact, maybe it's an opinion, but I think it's, that the to me that's how history progresses, and if you look at now, you have Demon Slayer. I think Demon Slayer has that potential, and
Where
I
ooh.
know maybe that's a hot take, but
No,
I mean
it's not a hot take. It deserves all the credit it gets,
mhm,
but we'll discuss that in part 3, because once again, to have something like the big 3 again,
mhm.
you would need certain elements in an anime, and that's something that modern day anime is missing, and we'll discuss that in part 3
Well,
more.
I,
I
I
definitely think that yeah, that's valid, and we'll discuss that in part 3. But I think for sure that it'll happen, because we don't know what the maybe because of our age, we don't know what the current young group of people who, when let's say when Toonami returned, the people that it captured, in that wave of its return, years from now, they may all say, we were all so influenced by this year or two where Toonami aired anime on cable TV, and we all of them watched it.
yeah,
And, let's say 10 years from now, everyone's talking about that whatever aired, in that on that, time in that time and on those that program. So I think it's definitely not impossible. You look at Jordan, you look at Kobe and LeBron, you look at the Beatles, and you look at you can keep going. There's always, you look at, I'm a big soccer fan. You look at Pele and Maradona. They say there will never be another. We have Ronaldo and Messi now.
yeah.
I mean, and we say today there will never be another. But I just think that's the way it goes.
I totally agree with that, because I think it's all about exposure. And if there is let's say a Toonami block that's introducing certain shows all at the same time, or kind of, maybe they aren't released at the exact same time, but maybe they're shared in a block, then you'll tend to lump those together as a combined experience. Um, so for us, like, that was like Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball, because like that's what came on literally on Toonami. Gundam Wing. It was like Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball, Gundam Wing, or Tenchi Muyo, or whatever. Like, those were the things that I lumped together just naturally, because that was my experience. But I was gonna say, like, today I would almost say maybe like Demon Slayer and My Hero Academia, and I don't know what else comes on Toonami now, but I feel like those are types of things that are kind of coming out at the same time. And I don't want to jump too far into part 3, but I feel like that's how things are ingested, and people tend to compartmentalize, you know, their big threes.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I'm not going to play devil's advocate in this part of the episode. So, listeners, listen to part 3, so that way you can hear me, really
Rip
just
us
put.
apart.
I'm gonna rip it all apart so bad then.
Oh, I can't wait. I'm earmarking my notebook that I don't have any notes written on, but I'm earmarking the page
Yeah,
so that way I can visualize that and remember during
I
part 3.
wanted to know y'all's opinion about, like, if there would be another big 3, and I love y'all's enthusiasm and y'all's positivity, but I'm going to crush y'all's hopes and dreams in part 3.
Bring it.
I just yeah, and again, without trying to like, hop into too much of a conversation on like modern anime, I think when you look around and you see the statistics from like Demon Slayer in the movie, I think that that's a really good sign, of where we're headed. And I
Wow.
have a neighbor, again, not to get too deep into the conversation. I have a neighbor who just went to see the movie, and the fact that it's playing at the movie theater still, a month later, I think says a lot.
It's I promise you, part 3 is gonna make so much sense at this point in time. But to get on with, this episode, another thing that happened during this time period is the influx of anime. It was just coming out left and right. You couldn't keep up with how much anime was coming out. And then not only could you not keep up, but you couldn't even find it because you didn't know where to look. So, too much to watch, many long, long, long series. So meaning more episodes to watch. What anime do you feel were underrated during this time period that you want to bring attention to? Because, we talked about those really, really popular ones that everyone kind of knew about. But, a lot of anime went under the radar because it just, you know, anime was coming out constantly, all the time. So much anime during this time. And yet we had no access to it.
Zatch Bell.
Ah, no. Oh, God. Are you serious?
Oh my god, I loved Zatch Bell growing up.
No.
That was my show. It was the shows, the manga, it was the video game. I loved it. Samurai Champloo, that was another one.
Okay, that's good. Okay, you redeemed yourself, Nigel.
Oh, Samurai Champloo was really good. I kind of put Samurai Champloo as like Cowboy Bebop, kind of same level of like
Yeah, same.
like same type, same style of show. Granted, totally different genres, but
But it's the same person.
yeah, that's true. It's the exact same voice actor here in English. I don't know about the Japanese voice actors, but yeah, it was. But it was such a. Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up because I did rewatch that recently. During during lockdown, I caught up on some old shows that I had wanted to rewatch. I think Outlaw Star was another one that got kind of a. That was one
Oh,
that.
I have that too.
Yeah, that was another one that was on Toonami and
It was.
Adult
In the
Swim.
earlier days.
And there
In the
was a
early
cut versus a non-cut version. Yeah, because there was a little bit more sexuality involved in that show than they aired on Toonami.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, I feel like Outlaw Star was really good. It did get kind of deep and metaphysical at some points, where it may have kind of gone over the heads of I know myself. Even rewatching, I'm like, man, this is kind of intense for me as an adult. I can't imagine as a kid. I just like said, okay. Um, I don't know if you guys ever watched, and I read it first, but then started watching after GTO, Great Teacher Onizuka. I feel like that was a phenomenal, like that was really popular in Japan. They've had like 3 live actions, or I think, or 2, that have come out from the show and the manga. But um, it was, I really, really think that's an underrated like series as a whole. Um, it's about a ex gang member that becomes a teacher. For I'll leave the reasoning for you to decide whether or not it's altruistic or not. It's honestly not, but he ends up becoming a good teacher because he actually cares about the kids as opposed to just going through the motions. And it was more of a commentary on the education system in Japan than anything else. And I thought it was really interesting. I read it and watched it before going to study abroad there, and then finished it right before going on to Jet. So it kind of was like like that commentary was an introduction to the education system for me. So I thought it was really interesting.
It's interesting the anime that y'all chose to mention that are underrated. Um Doug, I'm happy that you mentioned GTO because that one wasn't viewed on TV, whereas your other one and Nigel's, those were on TV. So like it really does put my point across. Like the TV was so important for viewers during this time. And it was really hard to find other things that weren't on TV. So for my recommendations, for my, anime that I want to bring attention to, I'll do one from TV, one not from TV. Mine would have to be Wolves Rain. Wolf's Rain is amazing. It was on TV. It was on Adult Swim. And so it was a late nighter because it was violent, bloody, very good. Oh my god, it was so good. Very psychological. So if you like thinking anime, this is a really good one. I love it to death. It made me cry because the ending was so sad. But it was so good. And my second one that I want to bring attention to, which wasn't on TV, but I think and this is going to show obviously what I rather talk about, which is shoujo anime. But this one particularly put a lot of shoujo anime in the spotlight after, and that is Revolutionary Girl Utena. It played a vital role in the shoujo anime genre. It did a lot of revolutionary things, just like in the title of the anime. This is when you first see not the first time, but the first time that it actually brought attention to it, which is the concept of like Yuri anime, which is, girl loves girl. Um it just did so much for the genre that I feel like it doesn't get enough credit for it, because when you think of shoujo anime during this time, like I said before, you think of like Ouran High School Host Club, um stuff like that. And I feel like Revolutionary Girl Utena doesn't get much credit, and that could be because it wasn't on TV. But yet again, Ouran High School Host Club wasn't on TV. So it's really hard to say a bunch of, what ifs, I guess. But yeah, TV just played such an important role in anime, and I think we really proved that during this generation of anime. We kind of proved it right.
I would add, I'd say Zatchbell, I'd say Samurai Champloo, but there's so many others that you could also add in there. One of the ones I used to really enjoy was Mushishi. I don't know if you ever saw that one, but it's a guy who, like, if you're a fan of Cady O'Hearn's work, this is like kind of as close as you get to that in an anime. It's a guy who's going around like rural Japan, helping people who are confronting spirits and things like that, and ghostly things. So
wow, Nigel, you have impressed me. I am so surprised you know what that is.
dude, that's a great, I feel like, I don't know,
It
that's an
was
essential watch to me.
It was very underrated. I'm surprised you know what that is.
Yeah, because I'm not that big of an anime person, but that was,
Which is
that
why
was
I'm so
one.
proud of you.
I've redeemed myself from Zatch Bell.
Yes, you did.
But yeah, there's so many.
Can I say one that's overrated?
Overrated? Ooh, juicy. Yeah, let's do it.
Fooly Cooly.
Yes! Oh my god, thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, Doug, you have redeemed yourself as well for me.
Hate it, man. It's I don't get the hype.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. I have all my friends who like freaking love it. They consider it like the holiest of anime. I'm like, no, it's stupid.
Jen, I'm surprised you didn't say Fruits Basket as one of your underrated ones. I don't think it's underrated, but it didn't really get on TV.
It is not underrated. That is the problem.
Okay.
Definitely not underrated.
Well, I just feel like it maybe I'm thinking just equating underrated to things that aren't on TV that should get that exposure.
That's what you're doing. Because the reason why I didn't mention Ouran High School Host Club is because that was huge too.
Yeah.
Listen, okay. So you know how in real life people were thinking, oh, Edward versus Jacob for Twilight. Boys, for Fruits Basket, it was Yuki versus Kyo. Which one are you? Like Team Yuki or Team Kyo? And your girl loves Team Kyo. Whoop, whoop.
I didn't even watch or read Fruits Baskets, but I remember that debate. I remember people choosing sides.
Watch it.
Yeah, I'm gonna get around to it one of these days for sure. And since both of you have, I have to.
Yeah.
It's been a long time. See, so like this golden age was when I kind of watched, right? Like I stopped really watching a lot of stuff around probably 2005 or 2006, kind of fell out of it.
Oh, then you're right before right after Fruits Basket you stopped, because Fruits Basket I believe came out in 2004.
I had a lot of friends that were into Fruits Basket, so I did know about it and I had seen it or whatever. Like So that was kind of the point where I jumped off from anime is around that point. So kind of towards the end of the golden
Yeah.
age. Um, so yeah, which is why this is probably the best episode for me to talk to because it's my most exposed.
Yeah, Fruits Basket definitely wasn't underrated. Everyone knew what Fruits Basket was. But Nigel, if you do want to watch Fruits Basket, the 2004 one wasn't bad at all. It just it ended stupid. But the new one's great. You should watch that. It's amazing.
I'll have to check it out. The manga's good too?
Oh, the manga's fabulous. I have the manga. Yeah, I have everything. Fruits Basket, everything.
Awesome.
I have everything.
Do y'all have any more hot takes on overrated stuff? And this on a spicy note?
Well, maybe not. Well, actually, I guess it does fit in this segment. I feel like there's often a stigma that the if you are a fan of One Piece, Naruto, and Bleach, you're not a fan of anime. Like those three are overrated, and so
you need to be. You're too mainstream. You gotta be underground, man.
Yeah. I feel like that's often when I hear.
I would hide the fact that I liked Naruto because I was like, I didn't want people in my fandom community to be like, ew, you like Naruto? Like, so I would like name these obscure ones because I'm a loser and I would find the obscure ones.
Nerd shaming. Ugh.
Yeah, no, it really exists that, if you like these shows, then yeah, it's like you're not a real fan. So I feel like that's a hot take, in itself. Is it
That is a hot
can you
take.
be a real anime fan if you like either or all of Naruto, One Piece, or Bleach?
And that's so funny because that's like it's still today. You can still find that today, which is so sad. Like, so what?
Just let people like what they like.
Yeah, and, like, just because I like Naruto doesn't mean I have, crappy taste in anime. Because you should see, like, my shelves, like, I just have, like, some obscure stuff that no one's ever heard of before, and then I have, like, stuff that, people have heard of before. I have a freaking Gurren Lagann flag in my game room hung up on the wall, like, it just I don't know, I got those are fighting words. Those are but
I think that might be like the chief hot take of them all,
it
in
is
this
a hot
subject.
take.
But
But
yeah.
I want to end this episode with a question of hope, of longing, and that is: do you think that anime from this time period can be still enjoyed today?
Yeah, absolutely.
100%.
It's timeless. I feel like these we've kind of mentioned this throughout the episode. I think like DBZ and Sailor Moon kind of like initiated this whole process. I don't want to say initiate, but they were some of the I guess the top of the class when it came to how it impacted everything. And I think it captured. Now, when you say enjoyed today, are you talking about enjoyed by the people who originally viewed it, rewatching it, or are you talking
No,
about today's
no.
audience enjoying?
Today's
Okay,
audience, could they go back to this time period and enjoy
I
anime
think
from this
so.
time
I think
period?
there may be I think some people may have an issue with the quality of animation may not be up to par with what they're used to. Because I mean, if you look at now, like with Attack on Titan, and oh man, I'm so out of the loop with today's stuff. I don't really have many,
Oh,
but
there's
My
just
Hero
this,
Academia or
yeah, like the
Demon
I have
Slayer.
style
Yeah.
is so different. If you look back to the 90s, even like if you look at the beginning of Naruto and where it ended, like you can see a difference, right? So, and same thing with Dragon Ball Z, really. If you look at that, I mean, the beginning and the end are a little different, not too much, but there's a difference. Um, so I think that might be a hard part for people to get past, the animation style.
I feel like it's not gonna be too hard because this time period, you still have those early 2000s, and that animation works a little better than the
Yeah.
90s animation for those viewers, and I don't know about y'all, but, like, I'm really active in the anime community all the time, and, I still see people today recommending people, "Oh, you should go watch, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood" still.
Yeah, well, I feel like especially once you get into the 2000s, I feel like those transition a little bit better. They're not that the ones in the 90s were period pieces by any means, but I feel like they transcend time a little bit better. Again, because I think the animation starts to look a little bit more modern. And it's I think that's always kind of a hurdle for people looking back and watching older media in general, is the quality. Like, you may be used to 1080p now, or 4K UHD, whatever. And then you go back and turn on something and there's like 2 black bars on the side of your TV, and you're like, what the hell? Like, why is this a square?
Yeah, and I think, to answer your original question, I think it absolutely, it can be enjoyed today. I think it depends. I think for the most part, I would say early 2000s, without any, updating or restorations, can be enjoyed. If you watch Death Note for the first time today,
oh yeah,
there's no way you'd even be like, hey, wow, this is so dated, the animation. Like, I don't think that crosses your mind.
No.
Now, I think if you watch Dragon Ball Z, it does. But I think that's why you see the success of Dragon Ball Z Kai. The need for that, I think, is a very good lesson, because what they did with that was they restored the entire anime, brought it into HD. They cut the filler.
Yeah, I know. Thank the Lord.
Yeah, they added. They shortened fight scenes too. And that, if you can restore some of those 90s anime, and I think people today could still, first time watchers could still enjoy the 90s version, but if you do something like they did with Kai, I think you preserve the story, but you cut some of the elements that, that even back then we complained about.
Yeah.
You cut some of those, and you still have a quality product where the story is still timeless and absolutely can be enjoyed today.
I do think that you brought up a good point with the filler stuff. I think that nowadays attention spans are much shorter, so there's a lot less tolerance for filler content than there was maybe in prior, like, in the driver's ed episodes of Dragon Ball Z, between like Namek and Cell, like all that stuff. Like, they're, what's the purpose? Like, it's more just for entertainment's sake, right? It's more for comedic relief and lighten the mood after kind of a long and arduous journey. But yeah, I think nowadays, like you said, it's much more, if the filler is much more of a burden to a show than a help.
But yeah, I think that's it for this week's episode. I mean, we talked about a lot for this genre. Not genre.
We did, yeah.
This time of anime. Thanks, you two, for joining me. I always love talking about anime. I never, ever have enough people to talk about anime too. So thank the Lord for this podcast for me.
Well, I'm looking forward to getting our drawers torn off in the part 3.
Wow.
I know. I'm going to be... like I said, I can't talk to any of this for part 3, so I'm gonna be the noob.
That's all right. Then you can just sit down and listen to Nigel and I duke it out in part 3.
I mean, I know a little bit, but yeah, I'm gonna save my knowledge, the little knowledge I have. I'm gonna save it for that episode. Dropping some bombs.
Well, you have time to do some research.
Yeah.
There you go.
And that's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Crew of Japan podcast. This week, we challenge you to think of an anime from this time that made an impact on the anime industry. Maybe even watch one of the underrated anime that we discussed in this episode. Share your favorite Golden Age anime with us on our social media. We're on Instagram and Twitter at Crew of Japan podcast. While you're there, follow and let us know how you're enjoying the podcast. That's it for today. Until next time.